Hey folks, okay, well this time around I want to go through the specs for Lab 3, where we'll pick up where we left off in terms of Lab 2, Lex and Yacc, and enjoying our parsing of the Wanderful language. So for this one, we're again assuming that everything that was specified up to Lab 2 has to be working. So that's kind of a core part of the background, if you like, for our Lab 3. And what we're going to do is add a bunch of new features to the language and a bunch of new context-sensitive checking for you to do to go along with that. So some new token types, some new parsing rules, and some new context-sensitive checking to carry out. All right, let's see, where did I want to take this? In terms of the updates to the language, again, this is all based off of our Wanderful language, and again, at the bottom of the page, you find lab by lab revisions to the language. So we've got our initial definition of the language, the removal of the whitespace stuff in Lab 2, and then a bunch of new features added for Lab 3, and we'll talk about those a little bit. Lab 3 is due February 25th at 5, so this will be after the break. What I want to do is just run through kind of the core objectives here, the kind of key new features that we're playing with. So for this one, again, usual idea, you'll have a Lab 3 Git repository that basically contains just the original skeleton versions of the lex and yacc files, so lab3.lex and lab3.yacc, and a make file. Obviously, you'll want to copy over the code that you used for Lab 2 as a starting point and replace the Lab 3 lex and yacc. So, what have we got? The biggest thing that we're adding this time around are variables, global variables, that are typed. So, when you declare a variable, well, you have to declare a variable before you use it, and you have to specify what data type it has when you declare it. So it's basically data type, variable name, semicolon. So usual kind of token list there. There's 4 data types that we're adding to the language. Int for our numeric types, name for our AI names, right? Those are the ones that begin with an uppercase and then a bunch of lowercase alphabetics. Strings, str, so this is going to be string literals, that kind of idea for print statements and whatnot. And then facings, so a data type to represent our north, south, east, west idea. So now we can declare variables that can store an AI name, or variables that can store a print string, or variables that store a facing, or variables that store a numeric value. And the idea is you can use the variables any place you could have used a value of that data type. So the rest of our language grammar is going to have to change a little bit now to reflect the fact that in a lot of different places a variable is now going to be valid as long as the type is correct. Which also means that you have to add type checking in your grammar rules for the language now. So now in your yacc file, the C code associated with each grammar rule is going to be doing things like checking to make sure that the data type of whatever you're working with is actually valid. Let's see, we're adding a new lookup function called face that's to figure out the facing of one of our AIs. So it's to figure out, to return our north, south, east, or west, which way is Bob looking, for instance. And again, the name has to be declared before it's used. String literals are single quoted, so single quote, blah, 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 single quote. Right now, you can't have a single quote inside your single quotes. We will throw in some escape sequences and whatnot for that in our next lab, Lab 4. Percent is valid inside there. So the only reason that I mention that is to keep in mind with your comment stripping that if somebody had a percent sign in the middle, if they said blah, 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 90%, something like that, you don't want your comment stripping to go, oh, that's a comment, and wipe out the last half of the string. So that's just a gotcha to be aware of. So we've got our new value types have got to include literals, right? We already had our numeric literals. Now we've got our string literals. We've got our variables can be valid values. Our names can be valid values. So think about the different places or the different value types that we can use. We're going to use an assignment operator, introduce an assignment operator so you can assign a value to a variable. And of course, with that, you have to make sure that the variable, it's got to be a variable on the left-hand side, your assignment operator, a value on the right-hand side, and the types have to match. Equals and not equals can compare any two things of the same type, but the less than and less than or equal to operators only work for numeric values. So for those, they can't throw those in between strings or something like that. All right, so you do need to perform your type checking when you're going through and parsing and doing your context-sensitive analysis on the source code. Print statements can now print any single value. It doesn't have to just be a name. So you can print a name, you can print a direction, you can print a number, you can print a string, whatever it happens to be. And as mentioned, we've got assignment statements now. So you can say variable is assigned, and then whatever value on the right-hand side, whether that's lookup, or whether that's just a straight numeric value, a straight literal value, right? For if you've got a name, a variable of type name, then you can assign the name of one of our AIs to that. Right? So lots of new data types to play with. We haven't introduced any arithmetic operators yet, but we'll do that in Lab 4 as well. All right, I think that's the set of language features that we want to look at adding for Lab 3 and the set of tests and checks that you're going to be adding. And as usual, you're going to want to develop a test suite of cases that you can test your programs against. So there are the gory details. Again, we'll talk about this in the Zoom sessions for Lab 3, but that should hopefully get everybody started.